been talking about, I've experienced learning about our third daughter that I was going to be a father, Toronto, Canada, through a singing telegram. So in some way I experienced some birth on the road. I experienced death on the road. First night of a opening up for a Doobie Brothers tour. It could be a 3-month tour. We lost our guitar player, 9 stories down. It wasn't suicide. I mean, it's every single life experience just doesn't change because you're on the road and playing with somebody big and glorious. You get sick, you have bad days, other people have bad days. It's real life out there. And like I said, I think I've experienced everything just about that you can on the road. But all in all, looking back at my years, I'll go backstage when John was with the Dixie Chicks. I went down and hung out, and I smelled the diesel of the buses, and my heart leapt. I missed it. I missed it. The fun, the getting on stage, like the guy said, we're musicians. And to me, it's an honor, and truly an honor to get to be on stage. And if we don't make the most of that moment, this is who we are. This is our moment. And with those Dick Clark tours, we had 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Those were your 20 minutes to play your ass off. This is showing who you are. And it's so good sides, bad sides. I think it comes down to your love of music, and all in all, looking back, I wouldn't have traded one single experience. So I just wanted to say that.
And I think it's also worth noting, perhaps, that it may not be for everyone. You may think that this is your be all and end all, what you want to do. You may go after and go, geez, I can't sleep in a bunk. I mean, for me, less sleep is good sleep, but for a lot of, and I think it's just an awareness of your surroundings and all of these things are important. But let's do some Q&A because I'm sure you guys have some questions.
Yeah, Dave. First, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. It's been very illuminating. I've got 2 questions for today. The first question, in light of Phil Collins retiring because of his physical disabilities at this point, maybe you could direct on touring or on the road what you might do to, as an athlete, so to speak, what you might do to take care of yourself in that regard. And then second of all, in networking and opportunities, I steered an artist who was really just a teacher to corporate and peer sponsorship. And because of his ability to represent himself, he got a gig through the peer sponsorship. So if any of you have leveraged that in your career life.
Well, I don't think there's any substitute for going out for walks when you have that little window. I mean, whether it's a shoe store or a record store or whatever, just to kind of get away from everybody and remember who you are as an individual, I always thought was good, not only for your body, but your head as well.
Because you're in a different city every day, you can experience sides. Right. See the sides. New coffee shop every day, new gym every day, new used record store, make friends along the way. And the way I spend my time is I go and I'm a big believer in music education. I'm a product of music education. So that's my way of feeling great and spreading good karma and sharing my experience. I go and I do lessons at a drum shop, or I go to the high school and I speak, or I go to the college and I talk to the kids about, now what? I'm graduating college with a 4-year degree in music education. What am I going to do?
Do you set that up in advance?
Set it all up and do it all myself. Wow. And it feels great. I do it, so I get up in the day and I go and everybody in our band has some sort of a physical regimen. We've got a 51-year-old guitar player that stretches 2 times a day, downward dog, does all this thing. Crazy walking on him. And then, me and then my bass player, Tully, I've been playing with this guy for 12 years. We always hit the YMCA and do a little 30 minutes of cardio, 30 minutes of weight, stretching, sauna, if we can get it in. Try to make it a priority. And then, as your gig gets a little bit better, the catering gets better. You know, you're doing the county fair circuit, everything's fried open, and this is a nightmare for a vegetarian. So like balance bars, you know, just make friends with balance bars and take your vitamins and drink lots of water. And the endorsement thing is kind of a necessity, because I think as musicians we want to hold on whatever wage we can get. And so just realizing, you know, if you use certain instruments that you're passionate about, then you know, you can contact the people, the manufacturers, and say, I'm actively using your instrument, I love it, I've been playing this set of drums with this cymbal for 10 years, and now the exposure level is very high, and what can we do? Can we do something, and you create a relationship, and you develop it, and they see that, you know, their product is being seen on television, or in front of large audiences, and I say, well, here's a record sticks, kid, and so it's this mutually benefit relationship, and then you don't have to spend all your hard-earned money on instruments. And then it also feeds the educational side. You know, if you wanted to start doing educational events, you know, then they send stuff for the kids, and the kids come to you and they get some schooling, but at the same time they're like, oh, I got a bass drum beater, well, I got a t-shirt, well, I got a free cymbal. It's just fun, you know, and it's a good way to help the companies you believe in, and then they help you too.
Yeah, and I also think it's important that you endorse things that you really do use and really do like, because I mean, there are certain guys in the bass world, you know, you see him with a different bass company in the bass magazines every 6 months, and it's like, and then you go see him, and he's playing the same old one he used to play. It's sort of like, and I think people see through that, and when you can come to a company and say, hey, you know, I've been using your stuff for quite a while, and you know, and of course now it's a lot easier to say, oh, here's a clip on YouTube where I'm playing your answer, whatever. I mean, it used to be, you know, take a picture of, you know, take a picture of your amp and send it to them or whatever, but you know, it has to be, and there was a time, like I can remember in the 80s when Peavey would give anybody who blinked an eye a free amp, and a lot of guys used them, but a lot of guys didn't, and you end up seeing them on, you know, eBay or the pawn shop or whatever, and you know, you have to approach any company like that. It's a two-way thing. You know, man, I love your stuff. I'm telling people about it all the time. You know, I'm using it here. I've got a big, you know, you have to be able to do it sincerely, or sooner or later they're going to figure out that you're full of it, and it's going to backfire, and you know, you sort of sold all your other gear because you just free gear, and then you get a letter saying, excuse me, we'd like that gear back because, you know, we heard you do such and such. So I think it's just about an honesty thing, but enthusiasm goes a long way, and you know, I think if you really are passionate about somebody's gear, you may have to take a couple hits of calling people and just find a friendly person with that company, you know, or maybe even, and you got to be careful too, because like, for example, Corner Music, you know, has been taking care of musicians here in Nashville for a very long time, and those guys are all friends of mine. And it's not like I want to go in there and play something new and then call up the company and go, hey, maybe you send me one of those for free? I mean, sometimes that just happens. But if you're actively screwing over your neighborhood, you know, store, they're going to figure that out, and you're not going to get treated the same way. I mean, I respect those guys. They've really been good to all of us over the years, and so it's just always remembering about those unexpected consequences of what you're doing, and I think that's a big part of how you present yourself every day as a person. You know, the whole trick to this is you want to be somebody that somebody else wants to work with, because it's like you've got a vibe, and you're a positive person. Nobody wants to get on the bus with a whiner, or even give the whiner a chance to get on the bus.
Oh. John might have to leave really soon. I just looked over. This is a photograph for our magazine. Hang on for a second. Every 10 minutes before I go by. Okay, John, a little bit more forward. Ready? Here we go. And we'll take another. Here, this is too good. Time out. Now it's out the flash. Let's go this way.
Okay, now change costumes.
CBA black and white.
So back to our Q&A.
I wanted to ask about, I know Rich always says say yes to every gig, and then of course you've got a gig with somebody like Jason Aldean or one of the other really good artists that you're happy with. How do you balance saying yes to every gig to when somebody calls you and you've got a gig like that, deciding whether or not you give a notice and move on, or have loyalty and stay there? Is that something that one time change in bands and you pretty much killed yourself, or is it kind of understood that sometimes you take the better gig when it comes along.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, if you're, I mean, you're playing with Jason now, so.
Yeah, when do you bail?
When do you decide when to bail, say yes to what could be a better gig?
Oh, I see.
Or when do you say, no, I'm loyal because I've been with Jason for this long, and even though this could pay a lot more money, I'm going to stay where I'm at? And it kind of goes with your say yes to everything, but you already got something.
Well, see, you know, like, I know the guys will agree with me, but the guys, like, we all have a good work ethic and want to play as much music as possible. So you have your bread and butter gig. So for, you know, my bills are paid with this Jason Aldean character, and I get a schedule for the year. I say we're going to do 75 shows for the next 4 years. So I'm going to do 300 shows for the next 4 years. That gives me a lot of time to work the phone and to go to 12th and Porter and Douglas Corner and 3rd and Lindsley and remind people, I'm here, I exist, I want to play music, because this is an out of sight, out of mind, you know, business. So those, for you guys who are looking to get connected, those are the spots to go. Your Douglas Corner, your 12th and Porter, your 3rd and Lindsley, your Rutledges. Go see showcases, go see bands, and have a business card and let people know that you exist and sit in. You know, ask to sit in and stuff, and I will book as many things as I possibly can around that schedule, first come, first serve. And if I'm booked with a corporate band, say I'm playing this nerd rock band, and we've got a gig in Memphis, and I agree to do something on the 29th of June, and Jason calls and I'm on salary and says, hey bro, we're going to the Bahamas I have to get a sub for my other gig, because that is where the majority of my income comes from. And you just call them, you politely say, hey man, I know it's a week out, but I got another guy that looks great as a nerd, and he knows all the material, and you send an overly qualified sub. And that's a really good point, because if you have a chance to send a sub, a lot of guys, they fear for their gig, and so they send a hack. And the guy shows up and doesn't know the material, because they want to make themselves look good. You got to send somebody equally as good or better than you, so your boss will go, wow, man,
Take a chance.
this guy came in and just...
Right, and it makes it easier to sub again if you covered yourself. But I think it's an excellent question, and and this is a slight segue into session world. There are some players that I've noticed over the years, they take everything, and they'll even intentionally double book themselves and wait till the last minute to bail on whichever is the least desirable of those gigs. And amazingly, certain people seem to be able to get away with that. And maybe it's because they're an incredible player, maybe it's because they're pals with whoever, but I always felt like that was pretty uncool. And I had trouble bailing. And there were times when I didn't bail on something that and there was a time, like with it, well, I'm in Western Canada with Don, and I couldn't do a Mark O'Connor session, and that broke my heart. And that was one of the reasons, that was right towards the end of me making my decision to get off the road. But I always felt like, that you have to make that choice. And I just want to be able to look somebody in the eye the next time I see them and know that I didn't really hose them and wait so long to bail on something that and I always say, I can't do this, but I will find you the best, if you have someone in mind, that's great. But if not, I will do the work and find you somebody good.
The 2-week rule. Never pull out under 2 weeks unless you have a very good reason. And it just comes down, if you have a really good reason, and it comes down to people's because you're like, bro, can you help me out, man? This gig is going to pay $1,000. And you book me on your showcase as a favor, it's $100. And I send you somebody, it's under 2 weeks. Try not to sub it out or change gears in the middle of in under 2 weeks. That's kind of a professional courtesy. But if for some reason you have an amazing opportunity, then it's really just you're asking for permission. And if the person says, man, I really need you, you take a $900 hit, and you maintain that relationship, because the whole thing is about relationships, being able to look in the mirror and respect yourself and know that you didn't hose somebody, and you maintain these relationships you can do it over a 10, 20, 30-year period of time.
So you both of you kind of touched on this as part of the question. Is it typical here in Nashville, because I'm just transitioning here from somewhere where it's not, but is it usually the player who finds their own sub if they have to do that, or are there a lot of the people that are booked?
I think it works both ways.
You should have one ready to go in mind.
But
Recommend that doesn't mean they have to.
Right.
I was going to say that what you're talking about, the situation where you have one main touring artist, and that's it's understood that you don't sub that out unless there's a death in the family or something really serious. That's a commitment. And especially but the plus side of this, it sounds like it's even more so. You can talk about how many gigs you're doing 3 or 4 years. I've never seen that. But almost all mid-level to major touring artists, things are booked, 6 to 8 weeks, if not 3 or 4 months in advance. So the schedule's pretty typically laid out, and if you book something else, and the things that will happen at the last minute are typically like TV, somebody's canceled Conan O'Brien and they've offered your artist a chance, so you've got, we're really sorry, but 48 hours notice, we got to do this thing, and you can't say no, and at that point, you may have booked, that's when it gets awkward, you may have booked a session that's really important, something you've been trying to get with for a while, you may have booked something that's very lucrative, you might have done whatever. But at that point, and it's pretty much understood, if people hire you for freelance stuff and they know you have a big level touring act, it's understood that that's got to be the priority. And you minimize it, you don't double book things, you don't do it dishonestly, you don't drag people around. But every now and then, there's going to be a last minute.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, in my experience on big tours, and the bigger the tour, the less likely it is to happen. If you do like a Dixie Chicks thing, the logistics of that, you don't add a date to the last minute because that shit's worked out. I mean, like an army, like 3 months in advance. And whatever last minute things that came up would be like a TV or a special thing or, command performance in White House, some big level last minute.
It took the death of my family, it took to sub my job out. I mean, it was almost 6 years nonstop, never missed a show, played, puking and pooping and high fever and puke bucket next to me. It's not a job that you cancel, that you sub out.
Yeah.
And so it's like, pooping and puking at the same time. Same time.
You're allowed to do it on stage.
Well, it's a good visual.
I think you bail on a gig when you bail on a gig. You know what I mean? Like if you're playing a gig and you're hired by somebody and it's time to go, you just know when it's time to go.
The writing is on the
I
wall.
don't think there's this big pressure. It's just, I'm not saying bailing, viciously bail. I'm saying when it's time to move on, you know when it's time.
Yeah, and that's kind of a trust your gut thing too. I think all of us have had a moment where you've been doing a gig for a while and all of a sudden one night you just go, I'm kind of over this. And then you just have to figure out the most graceful exit that you can.
And give 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You won't always get the courtesy of 2 weeks, but always try to give 2 weeks.
Or if it's a long-term gig and you've been on there a long time, especially if you think you're doing something fairly specialized, and you got the time, you can give, I think we probably all going to give kind of open-ended notice. I can work, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks if you want, or if you find somebody you want me gone in 2 weeks, that's cool. But I will stick around if it takes you a little bit longer to find somebody, or you can't schedule a rehearsal to really get somebody on a tour. If you're talking a highly rehearsed, slick thing, you got to find a window to rehearse with you guys sometimes.
Yeah, I gave Don Williams 6 months notice and auditioned my replacement. And it was just because, it was one of the hardest decisions I ever made because it was such a great gig, but I got to that tipping point where I had enough stuff going in town to where even though he was paying me really well and I was paying there, it was time for me to just stick it out in town because I'd gotten to a certain level and I wasn't going to take it up a notch unless I was always available. And then, of course, all the people that said, oh, yeah, you get off the road, I'll call you. Anyway, but other people did, and it was okay. More questions? Yeah.
I have a question. This is for studio sessions as well as touring. Throughout your careers, at any point you started getting jobs, did you guys ever feel like you're being pigeonholed to a certain genre of music, or maybe even started losing
Oh, sure.
jobs?
Happens all the time.
And even like to this day, do you still feel like you have any musical freedom to try other things?
Well, that's a good question. For me, I felt very typecast. I came to town with guns blazing, ready to set the country music on fire with bass solos. And pretty soon, so it was like, oh, he plays too much. And then I got a gig with Don Williams. Oh, he can't play. They do nothing. He doesn't play at all. And then I got in a blues band. Oh, he's a blues guy. And then I started a jazz band. Oh, he's a jazz guy. And after a while, it was like, hey, maybe this guy can do more than one thing. And you have to prove it because you're a victim of whatever your circumstance is. And I think it's human nature to typecast people, but I think that it's the human nature of creative people to figure out how to jump out of whatever those boxes are. And as far as like instruments and stuff, I definitely pushed the envelope a few times, and it occasionally, bit me back. But for the most part, I think people got used to me as he's a guy who's going to bring way too much stuff, but he knows what to apply where.
I think now the lines are more blurred, thank God. You know, I came to Nashville in December of '87, I sent out resumes, they looked at all the rock and roll, and back in '87 it scared the shit out of people. We can't use them, he's a crazy rock and roll. They ignored the film soundtracks, the television shows, the folk artists, they one thing. And it used to bother me, and then I realized I have no control over other people's perceptions of what I am. So just play your ass off, do the best job, and then sure enough, you know, through time, I mean, I wound up playing 23 number ones with Alabama. So it took a while though.
Country great.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I think now, thank God, I mean that sincerely,
And
the lines
yeah,
are a little bit more.
and it's
blurred.
happened musically as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I
because you
mean.
look at like
Yeah.
some of the stuff that Jason is doing, and I mean, there's no question that country music has gone through an incredible evolution, and there are many different opinions about it. We won't necessarily wade into that, but I think you kind of have to be prepared to do anything. And there are times where you go, wow, this is not really my bag. But that's a learning opportunity. As long as you just, you know, as long as you don't just completely embarrass yourself, you know. I mean, I used to be a pretty good sight reader, regular notation, and I just don't do it anymore. And I can do it, you know, but not anywhere near the speed I used to. But that's not what people call me for. They call me when they have a song and they want a particular kind of bass sound and a hopefully creative part. So you you have to approach those things one at a time. You know, it's like, okay, he thinks I'm this, so, and you have to be careful that you don't like over compensate. You know, like, oh, I'm gonna show him like I rock. We're not rocking, but I'm gonna rock. You know, you can't really do that. You have to be appropriate. And in Nashville, the number one thing is it's all about the song. And right after that, it's all about the singer. And then somewhere around number 6 or 7 is the bass.
So, the reputation's gonna come from being sensitive to what the song means.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have to go, but it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
More questions?
Yeah, I've experienced some road work, and I took some time off and went through 2 bad marriages, of course. And then,
Country music?
yeah, lived it at home. And just recently had some drive and want to go back on the road. I've talked to several musicians, and you know, and one thing that probably wasn't touched on is the fact of networking on fatigue factors and things when you're out there. Say if you're with an artist like you work for 14 years, or or playing for somebody for 5 months, it really matters. The fatigue factor comes into play to work. My question is, because I talk to them and they go, man, I really, you know what, I wish I wasn't with this gig because I'm not getting to do enough guitar work, I'm not getting to do enough, he took this out or she took that out or whatever like that, and we're not getting it. And so it's like, now I'm limited to do that. But in the back of your mind, you guys could probably answer this better than anybody. In the back of your mind, I'm thinking, man, if I leave this, somebody else is going to slide in that spot. It's going to take me, you know, a true act of God for me to ever get back up to this plateau again. Does that come into play?
Well, I think that you got to focus on where you're going next rather than worried about who's coming in behind you, because there's always going to be somebody who's younger, prettier, faster, whatever, you know. And it's really about going, okay, I'm not real happy here, and setting your sights on what you want to do, and leaving in such a way where you don't completely, because there are times when you might leave and then circumstances change. You don't want to close any of those doors.
You don't burn bridges on your way out.
You do not.
That's a cardinal rule. Not only are you burning bridges, I think it's a cardinal rule. Sometimes it happens, people do it. Or personality is so bad you're going to get blamed for something you didn't do on the way out or whatever. But part of that is that not only are you burning bridges with the artist you may be, instead of just saying, well, I'm going to give you my notice, I've decided to do other things, whatever, even if you actually hate it or you've grown to just. But if you don't leave certain artists on good terms, not only are you going to be on bad terms with them again, that kind of word gets around too. But it's just, it's such a word of mouth business and it's such a personality time-based business, and sometimes it's not about kissing ass, but it is about sometimes biting your tongue. Now, this is kind of.
Yeah, that's a great phrase, yeah.
And you don't want to do both at the same time, that's what.
I've always heard the best advice somebody told me when I was young is, you're judged on your reactions, not your actions.
And to answer part of your, I mean, Dominic is, but to answer another part of the question, I think most of us, when we've been in musical situations that were no longer satisfying, they weren't personally working like that. They might have been, you can be on a bus with great people that you like and admire, but still not feel like the hang factor is not satisfying, whatever. Ideally, if you're on a tour and you want to keep doing road stuff, or you need to keep doing road stuff to make a living, ideally, when you start being unhappy, you start looking around and you start maybe subtly spreading the word. You have to be very careful, because if you're doing a gig and word gets out and you're looking,
Yeah,
that's
you
not
got the same opening act for 2 months, you might not ought to say anything to the guys in the
Right.
band.
But ideally, if you start to be, usually you know it's not a sudden thing. If it's a sudden thing, sometimes like I can't handle this anymore, gotta go, I'll throw myself back at the mercy of the job market and hope something comes up. Ideally, when you leave one gig, whether you've gotten some great offer that's a big move up, or whether you can just kind of try something else for a while. Ideally, like any profession, you don't want to leave one job, you can help it without at least having a rough idea of what you might do.
It's hard to stay in a gig that you don't like because it's at a certain level. You know, I think that will lead to a lot of unhappiness. If it's, I think you've got to get out of there if it's not the right gig for you, because you're not going to get anywhere from there.
Yeah, it'll drive you nuts.
It'll drive you crazy. And so you just have to kind of take things into your own hands and get out and be the master of your own destiny.
And you're not doing yourself any favors. If you're staying on a gig,
You're going to sound.
I stayed on a gig at one point that I was really, really unhappy with. These were very exceptional circumstances, but I was really unhappy there. I wanted to quit. I couldn't, for a number of both personal and financial reasons. I couldn't bring myself to do it. And it finally, a decision got made for me. The whole thing kind of fell apart, and I realized, wow, I should have left 6 months ago. And this is like, it was this feeling of, oh my God, I just lost this really incredible gig. It was also this feeling of relief. Oh my God, I couldn't bring myself to leave. And this comes back to what John said about there's three, there's money, there's the hang, and there's the music. And you get 2 out of 3. And part of that is if you get 2 out of 3, I first moved to town, I played on the music, which is horrible. The hang was good, and it was a good entry-level thing into Nashville. They were good players, it was just the nature of the music was so far from what I liked. And we all played. Anybody's going to be a hired gun musician, you're going to play music sometimes that you have, hopefully not that you absolutely hate or don't believe in at all, but certainly we're all going to play music that's not the kind of thing we would listen to when we go home or go hear somebody else play. It's part of the deal.
And in Nashville, because it's so much about singers, that you can play really good music with a really bad singer, and you just kind of have to just sort of grit your teeth and get through it, because again, you never know who's in the back of the room going, hey, that steel player's pretty good.
Yeah.
Questions?
I'm wondering if any of you have toured on a bus with female musicians, and if so, how that affected the dynamics, and is it an overall positive or negative? And I'm asking for
I have, and it's been great. Just, everybody was just together. We all were in the same band. Everybody was a great time, no problems at all.
Yeah, usually they're one of the guys. I work for a lot of girl artists, and they're usually, have a sense of humor, and they write, they put on their sweatpants, and they're one of the boys. We watch movies and eat popcorn and do that thing. It's either that, or they have their own bus, and they're that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a separation factor. It's either one of the two, usually.
Yeah, do not look the artist in the eye, no direct eye contact.
Yeah, there are those.
That actually happens.
It does happen. Like, clear the hallway,
Yeah.
she's coming, and...
It's true. I mean, it's scary, but true.
I've done a lot. I played with Patty Loveless on and off for 19 years now. And, she's always had really good. Dean Richardson's one of the best fiddle players ever. She's been on the band most of the time. There's almost always a couple of women in the band. When Patty was at a slightly bigger height professionally, we had 2 buses. And the women on the tour manager on one bus and the guys on the other. And then it was like, oh my God, we're all down to one bus, and Patty's going to. And this is a side, like, I love Patty Loveless. Like, I just got back from spending a couple days at her house. I love her personally. She's a dear friend. But no matter how much you like the artist you're working for, they're still the boss. Even if you hang out as friends and all that, when it gets right down to it, they're still the boss. So if you can be on a gig where the boss is on a different bus, and I know we're trying to get up to a certain level, but that's a good thing. And I love Patty loves us to death, but when she's on the same bus all the time, like after the gig, you can't really talk as employees about how things went because it's all right there.
You're walking on eggshells.
That wasn't a gender thing. The gender part of it, having women on the bus, I absolutely love. It's a lot more diverse. It keeps most of the women I've been on the road with are pretty intent on proving they can be one of the guys, and some of them get out drinking out, cussing out, everything else. But for the most part, it keeps them, it's really easy. I'm sure y'all back me up on this, but if you're all guys on a bus, it's really easy to just devolve into kind of locker room, lowest common denomination, body function, humor and all that. I got nothing against it, I'm not approving it, it's not funny after a while.
Right.
If you have women on the bus, it's just
More interesting, yeah.
it's just boring. The whole locker room mentality.
So is that sexist if we say they become one of the guys? Should we say we become one of the girls?
I'm not touching
In my experience, I have a lot of people say, because I worked for Reba, I worked for Daisy Chicks, I worked for, I'm talking about my career earlier, but I've worked for female singers more often than not, and people are always like, oh, it must be really horrible, blah, blah, blah.
That's not great.
For the most part, it's been a positive thing, and when it's not, it has nothing to do with gender. And to the extent that gender enters into it, I think it's a good thing to have it. All guys together all the time.
Well, I think it puts the guys on a little better behavior standard, which is probably not a bad thing. That's a good question. Questions? Yeah.
Can you talk more about getting along with tour mates? You mentioned a few things like going for walks and activities.
Yeah, I mean that almost trumps every other aspect of being on the road. There's nothing worse than being trapped in a situation where you just don't like someone, or they don't like you, or you try to connect. And I mean, I try to think of myself as being a pretty friendly guy, but there are some people that they're just carrying their attitude in their front pocket all the time, and sometimes the only solution is to get away. A lot of guys will just, as soon as the gig is over, they're crawling in their bunk with a book. Then some of us would like to sit up and drink a couple of beers, maybe watch something on TV, maybe listen to some music. But at the same time, if you're listening to music at 2 in the morning, you got to be aware that there's guys right behind those speakers. Nowadays, people have drop-down DVDs and headphones and stuff. Maybe it's not as bad, but I was always aware of that at any moment the bus could open and some guy in his underwear is going to come and go, would you turn that reggae shit down? Sorry, man, we're just kind of getting all Jamaican, I mean, it's like, good intentions can be misconstrued horribly out on the road sometimes, and things that seem to be really little and trivial can just build and become like the guy who put his shoes out on it. And it's just, I think it's the people skills that come into play wherever you are, but it's like you're in a submarine together.
Oh.
And you, if you can't physically get away, you have to find a way to mentally get away. And whether it's read a book or put on headphones, I mean, I always enjoyed the hang and the conversation, and for the most part, I've been pretty lucky to be with guys on the road that I really like. But boy, it only takes one person with an attitude to kind of put a cloud all over the whole thing. So, you just got to nice them to death.
Kill them with kindness, and it brings up a good subject about creating opportunities for yourself, because if you're a gig hopper and you're going after all these other gigs and you're just jumping into situations with whoever happens to be there, I have a rhythm section. I mean, I found some guys that I get along with personally, professionally, and musically, and we're best friends, and that's how we travel together. We've created opportunities for ourselves, and we get along so well that fourth person in the band, we went through 6 or 7 people trying to find the right guy to play that fourth role, because that's really tough when you have 3 people that are best friends that see each other more than their wives or families or parents, and you're trying to find this other guy who's got to fit in personally, professionally, musically. That's tough. But I love our travel situation because we created the opportunity. So as you're on your Nashville journey, when you find people that you click with, then rent yourself out as a team. That's like a lot of great musical groups have done that, in Muscle Shoals in Los Angeles, the Wrecking Group, and I'm not comparing ourselves to that, but if you find a group of people that you get along with, keep that thing together. And we took a lot of hits along the way to keep our little team together. People were, you know, Rich, I want you to do this. Well, no, I can't do it because we are a team, and so it's a great way to travel. And if I don't enjoy the travel situation, I don't think I'm interested at this point in my life.
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking about your question too, you know, a big part of it is in any situation, this applies to life, and it certainly applies to sessions, but it definitely applies to being on the bus. In any kind of situation, especially if you're the new guy, you know, you've got to, whether you ever wanted to be a psychiatrist or not, you got to analyze that situation and look who's the guy that really wants to be the alpha dog. Who's, you know, and kind of look, and you sort of have to create that situation, you know, where like, because, you know, if you talk to if you say, oh, you know, man, steel player's out of tune all the time, and it turns out steel player and the guy you're talking to are the best friend. You've got to be aware of the, I hate to say it, politics of the situation and the personalities, and fit into that. And that means maybe not showing everything about who you are right off the bat until you kind of get your bearings, because you know, you could make a political comment that all your friends would laugh at and get a bunch of
Yeah, don't do politics or religion. That's a good. That's always a good.
Absolutely. Bruce got a question?
Well, I just
Bruce Bowden, everybody.
my limited road experience over the past 30 years. And a lot of it I've learned, I figured, you know, now that I'm in a more adult road situation from the old days. Dave and I go way back a long way, so we were well aware of some of the bands we used to be in when we were getting started. But being on time and being punctual, and you guys have already probably talked about that, but that's probably one of the simplest, but the most considerate things that you can do out on the road. It really sucks when you have a 3 o'clock bus call and there's somebody who just decides that they didn't want to pay attention to that 3 o'clock bus call. Or when you have a 4 o'clock sound check and the other guitar player's nowhere to be found. You know, and it's just those things will start, you know, building up. And the other thing is try your best to be friends with the road manager.
Exactly.
Because it's like if you get on the bad side with the road manager, it doesn't matter if you're right and they're wrong. They're the ones who have the artist's ear all the time, and they have the, you know, and I, you know, from personal experience, I've had issues with road managers before where I thought I knew better, and it's come back to bite me in the ass, and it's been a real great I'll show me moment, you know.
Yeah.
That sort of ties in with, that's exactly what your previous thing made me say, be friends with the road manager. It also sort of ties in with choose your battles really careful. There's going to be things, every once in a while there's going to be issues that maybe you can get, this is like office politics anywhere, but again, it's office politics where you don't go home at the end of the day and refresh and go back to the day. You live with it all the time. But there's going to be day-to-day issues about maybe how they're doing hotels or how they're doing just day-to-day things, which are usually a road manager's call. And people do, especially if you go from one gig to another. I mean, people talk about a touring band being like family, and a lot of times it's a really dysfunctional family, but it is true. You have to, and you really learn this, and I'm sure we've all done this, but where you go from one touring situation where you're like in a family, and you've learned to suss out who's who and how you deal with things and which things you have in common, you talk about which things you don't. You really, and you can take that for granted because you learn to fit in. And Bruce, I know you know all this. And then you immediately, and I've done this a few times the last couple of years, immediately end up jumping into another gig. Like you got to be, oh my God, oh yeah, all that stuff I've taken for granted about how to, I can be comfortable talking about this subject and that subject, and this person here I kind of shy away from, you know, we get along, but we're not. And all of a sudden you got to start right over. That's when you're really aware of all these different things we're talking about. And you see two of them back to back because they're so different. And
and so you almost have to create a list of, you know, what are you willing to do to take the gig, like, because all the travel parameters are going to be different. It's like, well, in this gig we get a cleanup room. The whole band gets a cleanup room. We all take turns. But in this gig, there's 2 to a room, and on this gig, you get your own hotel room, and in this gig, you shower at the arena. And then there's always stipulations with per diem. Is it 25? Is it 35? Is it 50? No per diem. Or is it a situation where, you know, you have a personal chef, or is it local catering every day? These are like, you know, some deal breakers for some people. Like
Well, yeah, the roommate thing, you know, when you think you're gonna have your own room and then you get a, and then you're a roommate with somebody you really don't know at all, that, you know, I was really fortunate in my years with Don in that Dave Cinco, who's my best friend, was a sound guy, and he was always at the venue, so I had the room to myself most of the time.
Yeah, room with
And
the
it was great.
If you gotta share rooms, room with the
Yeah, because they're working around the clock.
Any other questions? We're gonna kind of wrap things up here.
Real quick, you're talking about the hang and about everybody clicking together. Have you found there to be a common denominator to create that? Is it a hobby? Is it personalities? Is it being completely different from each other?
It has to evolve. It's gonna be different every time. You can't make it happen.
You gotta try to find some common ground somewhere, you know, and then kind of build on that, I think, you know. That's a good point. Did you have a thought on that,
Well,
Bruce?
just real quick, Paul Franklin told me years ago when I was trying to be a session player, and he said, man, you just got to learn where to stand in the room. And it's you know, it's kind of a Zen kind of thing, but, you know, you're going to have to figure, you know, I mean, you got a bunch of vegetarians in the band, you don't bring double cheeseburgers on us, you know, I mean, and it's just, you just got to, the social skills, it's a psychological exercise, and you're going to be living with these people, and, you know, it's just, you just need to try to become aware, and trust me, I wish I'd known a lot of this stuff even 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. Where does this stuff come to now? But I mean, it's a growing process.
Mutual respect for each other, you know, having mutual, just, you know, being kind, and, you know, like, everything that I talk to my road manager, it starts with a question, everything's got, is there a chance that I could, do you think I could, can I get 2 tickets from my grandparents tomorrow, like, can you get me to the gym? And it's just asking and being, you know, rolling with the punches and being kind, and not really expecting anything, but.
Dave said it before, but yeah, when you're new in a situation, whether you're the first guy in a section, whether it's guys who work together every day and you're the new guy, you know, hang back and listen and be an observer. Don't throw yourself in the middle of it trying to make an impression. Like first week or two on a bus, especially if it's a band that's been together for a while. If it's all new guys been put together for a tour, and presumably you rehearse and you get to know each other, that's kind of a different thing. But if you are the new guy in a group that's been together, keep your mouth shut. I mean, just pretty much.
Learning
keep
how
your
to
mouth
listen,
shut and
you know.
observe and figure out, okay, where can I fit in? And you learn to emphasize. There's, okay, these things I have in common with these people. We'll emphasize that. These other things I probably think a little differently. We might do politics, religion, or being a vegetarian, whatever. I'm not going to pretend it's not true, but you just de-emphasize that stuff. It's like any other social thing. You find the things you have in common and try to build, which answers your question a little bit too. Find the things you have in common, they'll gradually grow. And if you have 9 people on a bus, just making up examples, there might be 5 guys who go to the gym every day. There might be 4 guys that overlap for that like to play golf. There might be somebody like me that doesn't do either of those things and will just immediately, I'm known for just disappearing and doing like Dave, and I'll take a walk or go find a, you know, used record store or what. That's my thing. People just know I'm gonna disappear. I'm not, to me, like the social thing on the bus and the dressing room, there's so much time, airports, dressing rooms, everything, there's so much time when you're going to be hanging out that's just there.
That you can't get away.
And I try to make the most of that, and I love it. I'm sociable, you know, I like to hang. But for me to make that work, I personally need as much of the other thing to balance it out. So when I do have time, if we get to the hotel at 10 in the morning and bus calls not until 3 and we're downtown in some cool city, I'm gone, you're not even going to see me. And there might be 1 or 2 people in the band that are the same way, we're like, we're going to take a walk, let's go, there's a cool neighborhood over here. That's how I deal with it. And then but when I'm hanging out with people, like, I find the things that we have in common and emphasize that.
And you have the luxury of being the old guy in the band, being nice to the new guy. And that goes for recording sessions too. I remember vividly being vibed out so many times by the old dog in the band or the old dog on the session. It sucks. So when you have the luxury of being the old guy, being encouraging to the new guy, it's just...
That's really true because,
it's a sweet thing.
yeah, when I first came to town, you know, you try to ask for advice, the only advice they give you, go down Broadway and hang out in the bars. That was the only advice you ever got. And the subtext was, well, either drink yourself to death or run out of money and get back out of town, kid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, I mean, without trying to make a horrible segue here, that's one of the reasons why I ended up here because, you know, I found myself in that position of trying to, you know, help other people and then running into roadblocks trying to get useful information from our own organization here, and that's what kind of led to us, and I'll make yet another segue, since we may get whiplash here. We do have a road scale. It was really never, it's kind of not really talked about very much because it's a minimum scale, and of course, if you're making more than the minimum scale, you wouldn't want your boss to know about road scale. But, and it's something that we have to explain constantly, whether recordings or whatever. Scale is a minimum standard. And everyone has the right with supply and demand to negotiate more than, and or if you come into a gig and it's where you are. So when we became officers here 2 years ago, the whole idea that the union hadn't done a lot for road musicians really bothered me. And I had been on the other side of that, and so I said, do we have a road scale? And we started looking around, and we found something dated 1994 at $140 a day, and it was like, holy crap, we can't show this to anybody. So we did about a year ago, we went through and we took our old road scale and we kind of updated it a little bit. It's $200 a day. We request 10% pension. Now, the whole idea of road pension will be a subject for another day, but there are ways, if you have a steady gig and you've got pretty steady personnel, there are ways to get yourself into a pension plan with your boss. And I'll just throw it out there that if you find yourself in that situation and there's genuine interest in the band, come to us. Let us do the hard sell for you, because what we would do is call up the accountant. Say, hey, would you like to save your guys some money? And the accountants, you got them on that. And it's like, because they don't have to pay payroll tax on anything that's contributed to a pension fund.
I just wanted to throw in, for some of you don't know the difference, as a recording musician, the record companies have to pay into your pension fund. So for example, my pension fund's been building since the 60s with all the records. So that's why what Dave was talking about, the road musicians for a long time, we felt was neglected, that the word didn't go out, and there's musicians who've been out there for 25, 30 years who have no pension, and so that's why we're trying to spread that word. So I just wanted to throw
Yeah, and so just the message I'm trying to send here is to let you guys know as you go through your journey here that this is no longer a union that doesn't take care of its people out on the road. The way we look at it, these people, we're representing. Anybody who's out on the road, out of Nashville, is representing our whole community. And we're proud of these players, whether it's a barroom gig in Texas or Carnegie Hall. And so, one thing to be aware of, and we'll, I don't have any copies of this, but I think we'll make sure that anybody that wants to know more about this, something to be aware of is when you go do a show and somebody films it, it does not matter that you got paid by your boss. They owe you money. And we've had situations where, somebody went and did Celebrity Apprentice and brought along their band. And money was received, but the band just got paid their regular day rate. And now, Celebrity Apprentice is tricky because it's not a signatory union show. But let's say you go to David Letterman or Jay Leno or whatever, Saturday Night Live, doesn't matter what it is. If somebody's filming it for another use, you deserve money for that over and above what you do and what you get paid to get to the gig. It says right here, this scale applies to a live performance, musical performance that does not include compensation for non-musical services of any kind. And it also, in other words, if you have to do something, if you got to wash the bus, it's not in your money. But it also says that this is for live performances only, local and national radio, TV recordings are not included in this scale, must be paid separately. And somebody will hand you a piece of paper and say, sign this. And the paper says, I agree that I'm not going to get shit for this gig, other than what my boss is paying. Don't sign it. Call us. But I can also tell you, this is something I just learned recently. If you sign it, it's not worth the paper it's signed on. Because all of the big agreements that we have state that there are no waivers. So people are going to try to do that all the time. And we just went through one with the Judd's reality show, where they just kept handing these bullshit releases, and one of the guys in the band just kept taking pictures of them and sending them to me, and I'd change some language, make it better. And finally, at the fourth release, it was one, okay, you can sign that. because it stated that AFM scale is going to be paid for that. So it just, as a way of kind of wrapping things up, I just want to say that, you know, we're really proud of the way that musicians represent Nashville all over the world. And, you know, and those of you that have traveled around, you know, you can just say the word Nashville, and people go, oh, music. They don't even necessarily go country music. You know, this is an amazing town. It's one of the last places where people can still come chase their dreams and have it actually happen. And, you know, and we want to be able to facilitate that in every way we can. So even if you're not a member, you're welcome in this building. You're welcome to come and ask us questions. If we can help you, if you get in a panic out on the road, you know, my cell phone's in the local 257 directory, you know, and I'll take a call anytime, day or night. I do just want to thank everybody for coming. Thanks to Joe and Will for being part of this. And anybody who didn't sign up if you'd like, and we'll keep you posted on things that are happening.
How many of you all play out in a regular gig around town? Because we all got to support them. I know Rich plays Tuesday nights at Red Rooster at 10 o'clock. It's Mathematics. It's a great show. Go support. Who else, Craig?
I'm out there. If you ever see Jonelle Mosser's playing anywhere, come on down. The band rocks hard.
And I play with a band called Three Ring Circle. We've got an album release show at Station Inn coming up April 20th. Hopefully the album will be ready. But yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of different angles with this, and I think it's just important to just, you know, listen to your gut and pay attention to what's going on and listen and learn from other people. It's really easy when you're the new guy to feel like you've got to impress everybody right away. And what Pete said, you know, it's just kicking back a little bit and get the lay of the land before you throw your soul out on the table.
I just want to say one more thing. Yeah, if you want to try to reach us, NashvilleMusiciansPlural.org. And like Dave said, any questions, we're here to help. That's what the Musicians Union is all about. It's helping musicians. So give a call, come on down, hop in, we can drink coffee and talk. So.
All right. Appreciate
You, man. You know, I had to come out and support you guys. What's going on? Appreciate it. I just got back into town. I've been